All right. I got here early, made sure the iPad worked. I also screenshot it at home this time, just in case. And it's working, so of course. So if you were not here, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it's always worked every time I turn it on, and so when I turned it on, it wasn't there, and I got the circle, and I didn't do anything different, and it's working this time. So we're gonna trust that that was God the last time. And so I thought last time went fairly well, considering, but when I was done and got home, I was like, oh, I forgot this, and this, and this, and this. And so I was talking to James, and then we got feedback from a few of you, and I was like, I think we have to do 2.0. So this is Sabbath as Resistance 2.0 by Walter Brueggemann. Hefty read. He is not easy to read. So you're welcome to the book, but I don't necessarily recommend it. Like it's not light reading. And so you're gonna get nuggets from me because it's just a lot to process, but, and we've touched on it, and so the first part for sure will probably be a little bit more review because that's what I remembered last time. And then we'll get into some of the newer stuff. And then if we want, be thinking now, if anyone wants to volunteer, we got 2 chairs up here again. So James called it an interview, which I liked. That was a little better. Did it feel like an interview, Jeremy? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if you feel like being interviewed, we'll see if there's time for that. But before we head on into that, I have a question. It's a silly one a little bit. Who has a mother? Who has a perfect mother? Oh, kiss up. My own kid didn't even kiss up. Come on. I love it. Yeah, so we don't have perfect mothers, but we all have mothers. And as Mother's Day, it's fitting and appropriate to honor them. And we're going to talk a little bit about Exodus 20, 10 Commandments. And there's one in there, honor your mother and your father. And so that'll be woven in a little bit today, this time. As you think about your mom, not everyone has positive memories, as Greg hit on. So if you don't have a positive memory of your mom, put in a substitute. I would like everyone, just for like 10 seconds, what is a positive memory you have of your mom? So just think of that on your own. Not complicated, don't make too much of it. And then as you sit with that and think of her in that way, what are a few words that come to mind? So just shout them out. Patient. Caring. Affirming. Joyful. Wisdom.
Cook. I didn't say that's all she was. She was all those other things.
In that memory, she was a cook. That's what I'm going with. I know, that's what I was like, nurturing, yes. Providing, yes. Meeting needs, yes.
There you go, meeting needs.
Yeah. Faithful. Talented. Supportive. Engaged, that's a good one. They're all good. Loving, yes. Who feels seen in that moment? If we have a positive memory, we probably feel seen or known. Yeah, so hold on to those words. We'll come back to them. And I think they are connected to what God's going to do today. So as we are talking about Sabbath as resistance, just a reminder, Sabbath is the principle that Jubilee is built on. So we have to get Sabbath right to get year of release right, which is the 7th year, to get Jubilee right, which is the seventh year, the 50th. So if you're wondering why I thought we were in year of Jubilee, we are, but we're also going to talk a lot about Sabbath. And Sabbath is an opportunity to practice mindfulness in a society that is increasingly mindless. So we get to be mindful in a society that is increasingly mindless. And we remember Sabbath is not a rule we have to follow. It's a biblical principle that can bring vibrancy to our life, and we apply the Old Testament wisdom of it to the New Testament freedom we have in Jesus. Talked about that several months ago, but we want to be sure to keep that in mind as we talk about it. Too often with Sabbath, we just think stop. And so we're stopping, but we're not necessarily resting. And we're checking out, or we're disengaged, or we're playing in a way that isn't bringing about the relationship with God. And so I really liked when we did the 10 Commandments in wedding speak last time. And so that, in this commandment in wedding speak, is keep a date night for just the two of you. And so the two of us in Sabbath is me and God. And so there are times when you go on a date with your honey and one of you pulls out all the stops, right? You show up with flowers, you got the right reservation at the perfect restaurant, dinner is amazing, you're looking in each other's eyes, and you come home and maybe candles and all the things. And then let's face it, there's other date nights where you're like, you got time to go to the grocery store on the way home? Like, we got stuff to do. But it's still doing life together, it's still one-on-one, and it's still building a relationship. And that's a lot with this stage of life. Married, dating, retirement, I would assume, gives you another aspect on dating that I wouldn't understand yet. Maybe all day is a date when you're retired. I don't know. But we want to make sure it's not just an activity. And that's sticking to that rule part. It's not just this thing. It's a relationship that we have with God. Okay, I hit on that pretty good last time. And so when he introduces this 10 Commandments, he starts Exodus 20, verse 1 and 2. And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. So he sets that up with reminding them of empire. So we talked about that last time, what empire represents and all of that. So we have empire versus kingdom of peace. So those are going to be our contrasting things. And so the God who rests, then, is the God who rescues us. And I love that. So he's rescuing us from Egypt, and he's setting up these new guidelines that are going to bring us an opportunity to be in right standing with him. And so as he's rescuing us from that work system, from their rules and from their gods, and from what those all represent, which is often greed in money, sex, and power. And so as soon as we hear Egypt and empire, we have to think of the socioeconomic systems and practices that represents. So it's not just Egypt. We can have this in a church. We can have this in a business. We can have this in a country, obviously, but we can even have it in a family. What are the socioeconomic systems and practices in the unit that you're talking about? And so God is setting up a new system and new practices where we are not just brick makers. We are rest takers. And God reveals himself as a God of mercy, steadfast in love and faithfulness, committed to relationship. And all of that takes us back to creation, where we have God rested. He's not a workaholic. He's not anxious. And the well-being of creation does not depend on endless work. That one really hit me. We don't have to keep striving. God didn't have to keep striving. Creation is established and will last through our rest. So Egypt's empire and system create anxiety. They create fear. And Sabbath is a resistance to that. Pharaoh brought into a system of compulsion because he always needed more. He needed more grain, more storehouses, more power, more wealth. And his desire for more created a restlessness that could not permit rest or Sabbath for himself or anyone in his domain. It cannot be satisfied, and it's never enough. Sabbath also allows us to resist coercion, and this coercion is persuading someone to do something by using force or threats, so being bullied. So we can stand up to being bullied when we practice Sabbath. And they go from a society in Egypt of manufacturing. Anybody here work in manufacturing? If you don't work in it, our economy in Elkhart County relies on it. So you're involved in that in some way. So this is a big one for us. So society built on manufacturing, they're being called into a society built on agriculture. So this is a reliance on the land and on creation and on God. But even this can be corrupted. On one hand, the land is regarded as property and possession to be bought and sold and traded and used. But on the other hand, in a context of covenant, the land is a birthright and an inheritance of the people of God. If the land is a possession, then the proper way of life is to acquire more. But if it's an inheritance, then the proper way of life is to enhance the neighborhood and to extend family so that all members may enjoy the good produce the land produces and brings forth. So I love that explanation of that's what makes Jubilee so special, is it's bringing back the inheritance part of land in the Hebrew culture. In a society defined by production and consumption, there are huge gradations of performance. Because if we have to make and take, then what you're making gets judged. How much you're making gets judged. What quality of what you're making gets judged. And so then with that becomes worth and significance is tied to what we make and take. And so in such a social system, everyone is coerced to perform better, produce more, consume more. Such valuing creates the haves and the have-nots, significant and insignificant, rich and poor, people with access and people denied access. But Sabbath can break that. On Sabbath, you do not have to do more. You do not have to sell more. You don't have to control more. You don't even have to know more. Sabbath can also be a resistance to exclusivism. And that was where last time we talked about the eunuchs being, at first they are forbidden from mentoring worship practices, but then in Isaiah, they are included. And so anyone can come to the Sabbath in the body of believers because Sabbath represents a radical disengagement from the producer-consumer rat race of the empire. We are stepping out of that, and we're stepping into a community that welcomes members of any race or nation, gender, or social condition, so long as that person is defined by justice, mercy, and compassion, not competition, achievement, production, or acquisition. And then the one we didn't talk about at all last time because I couldn't remember anything about it was Sabbath helps us resist multitasking. When we compromise Sabbath and inadequately keep it, we become seduced to forgetting, which is what Moses reminded us over and over and over again in the Torah. When you enter the land, do not forget. But we forget, and we think we can secure ourselves. And so then we turn to that system of commodity, to the conviction that having more will generate well-being. And so in a lot of the prophets then, they talk about you keep the Sabbath, all the while scheming for commodity. Multitasking is the drive to be more than we are, to control more that we do, and to extend our power and effectiveness. And such practices divide the self, and our full attention isn't given to anything. So we're always trying to do this, and then this, and well, if we do this, and we do this, and then we just have to get all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. And that is a splitting of the self. And Jesus spoke to that in Matthew 6. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth, this commodity empire. Doing tasks of acquisitiveness while trying to communicate humanly is the true mark of the turn to commodity. I know that's kind of hard to understand, those are words, that's how we talk all the time. But when we're trying to acquire, get, we lose our humanness. We lose the way God made us. We lose our identity in Him. And we start relying on empire, on commodity, on our production. We become commodities ourselves to one another, and we are bought and we're sold and we're traded and we are cheated. And that's really, really sad. I think as we stop and think about that, it's a little bit like we're like, no, I don't cheat anyone. I don't use anyone. But then you think about maybe the ways you try to get ahead in certain groups or in your job or even, this is so silly, right? But like rushing to a line to get there first. Why? Why do we have to be first? Why do we have to have the most? Why are we always trying to get more? And at what costs are we doing that at? I think about the goods we buy in this context. I was raised to be really thrifty. So I think a good deal is like something to brag about. But what if that product or that sale or that gimmick, whatever it is, was built on the back of someone else? And again, a really silly example, but you guys know I gave up shoes. Have not bought a new pair of shoes in 5 months.
Thought maybe you were gonna say 5 years.
No. I love shoes. But as I was thinking about that, where are shoes made? If I spend $100 on a pair of shoes, what else could that $100 go to? What would $100 mean to the person and or people who made my shoes? It was put to me one way, like this a couple years ago. What if we had to get all of our goods and services within a 100-mile radius of our home? I would probably have no shoes. moccasins. Because just look at where we're getting our stuff and why we have to have the stuff we think we have to have. Sabbath helps us break through that. That need to consume, that need to have, that drive to have the best, be the best, get the best deal, be first. That's what we have to break. That's what's going to set us apart when we live in an empire. So following the Sabbath command summons us to break the pattern of having a divided heart. And in that passage in Matthew 6, Jesus follows that up with, and do not be anxious. Because he knows if we are living in that empire, if we are trying to serve God and wealth, we will be anxious. Which is full circle to what Sabbath helps us break. So I feel like since I talked about this the last time, I've sat there and all of a sudden gone, oh, wow. I know how the Israelites felt a little bit. Like hearing this command to take a Sabbath and going, what does that look like? How do I do that? It's not just going to church on Sunday. It's not, honestly, one of the pictures I see the most is anybody remember Little House on the Prairie? What do they do on Sundays? They sat in the front room and stared at each other till the sun went down. I don't think that's our answer, right? I don't think it's don't even carry anything or the 30 rules of Sabbath that many of the Jews follow today. It's not that. So what is it? And that's just the journey we're going to have to be on. And I think it's key to figuring out how to break through, like Jeremy talked about. How to get us out of this in-between period that we're in, that Greg talked about a couple weeks ago. And if I think about that, and I think about like why or what or how, I wonder if we have to share the gospel or welcome in new believers, or someone asks us even, just like, what's your personal testimony? If it's not how you live in a kingdom of peace in the middle of empire, aren't we just adding to empire? Aren't we just giving them more rules? Aren't we just adding to a system that's already broken? Well, you gotta go to church, or you have to do this, or you have to read your Bible every day, or you have to spend an hour in prayer, or you have to go get inner healing. I'll pick on myself on that one. We have to get it figured out somehow. And we'll never get it figured out right. We'll never be 100% there. That's not what I'm implying. But we have to give the right message. And we have to live it out as we do that. Is anyone thinking, yes, I need to be interviewed? I want to be up there. I want her to ask me all kinds of questions and read my mail. Anybody? Anybody know it's them? Okay, I think we're going to skip that part, especially as I look at the time. We've all got Mother's Day plans. And so if we go back to those words, let's see, we got patient, moms. We're back to moms. Moms are patient and caring and wise and faithful, and they affirm us and they bring us joy. They provide our needs by cooking and cleaning and giving us, I'm also going to add to that one, they provide a place of safety. When you know you're going to come home and there might be some food either in the fridge or on the table, that's powerful. They're talented, they're loving, they're supportive, and they are engaged with us. They see us and know us. I believe we are called, all of us, man or woman, to be that for the church. To be those things for each other, and especially non-believers. Especially those living in darkness, in bondage, those sick and hurt and striving and trying to get more. And so how do we embody those attributes on the day-to-day? How do we become mothers in a kingdom of peace, not empire? And I think God is a perfect example of mother to us. He's above gender. If you have a problem with that, come talk to me. But if he can only be a man to you, I refer to him as he also, so I'm not saying he's a female, but he's above gender. And so he is the perfect mother for us to go to as well. And so if we want to be able to give this to the world, we have to be able to receive it from him. We get to, again, we can give that to one another, but we first and foremost have to get that from him. And so I think that the challenge for today is to live in that Sabbath place where that's what we give. Giving a broken world our patience and our care and our wisdom and our faith, and we affirm them, and we love them, and we provide for needs, and we create safety, and we see them. So Father, I thank you that you give us those things so that we can share them. I thank you that you spoke these commandments to people that didn't know you yet. But you loved them, you heard their cries, and you rescued them. And Lord, you're rescuing us, you hear us. I'm thankful we do know you, but Lord, we also live in empire. And we want to be called out of it. We want to live in a kingdom of peace. And so as we learn what that looks like, we just ask that you show us specifically what that looks like for us. What does it look like to have a regular date night with you? To be in an intimate relationship with you like two lovers, or like a husband and a wife. To be known and seen and loved. And sometimes I think loved anyway, right? You see and you know me and you love me anyway. Because your love is unconditional. So show us how, show us when. Show us where. And let us, be a light in the dark place. Amen. Yeah, so thank you. Enjoy your Mother's Day. Love on one another. Be safe. Anything else? And if anyone needs prayer, please come up. And yeah, if you want, like, even like anxiety and resistance or resistance to anxiety and that multitasking and all that, that's a journey we're going to be walking on. So if you want help on that journey, let us know. Like, we don't have it figured out, but we'll walk with you. Blessings.